As this is a global event and we have many participants joining from all around the world, we would also like to make the discussion now a little bit more global for the last item on our agenda today. For that, I'm happy to hand over to my colleague Karina, who is joining virtually from Brazil today. She will be joined by 3 speakers from around the world, one of them actually standing right next to me here in Berlin. For more on that, I hand over to you, Karina.
Thank you, Vera. And in reference to our speakers here today, I wish everyone a good morning from Brazil, but good afternoon in Germany and good evening in India. I'm super honored to be here today to moderate this panel. That, in my opinion, is one of the most interesting ones because it will take all the information that we have already discussed here about the QI system and place it as a tool to foster openness, innovation, economic development, and so much more. In the international panel, Quality and Safety Without Borders, the importance of international harmonization for trade, will receive the input from 3 powerhouse women that have followed the GPQI cooperation closely, but most importantly, that have done an outstanding work in their fields, considering always the relevance of the international order to enhance the impact of their work. From the industry, we are here today with Sonia Prashar, who is Deputy Director General at the Indo-German Chamber of Commerce, the largest bilateral chamber in the world, where she's responsible for defining strategic direction, vision, growth, and overall performance. She's on the board of different companies and has a long-standing experience in the industry working in international trade and development. From the conformity assessment business, we have Pia Kathöfer. Pia, forgive my German accent, so please correct me if I didn't speak your name right. She coordinates the Corporate Regulatory Affairs in the Accreditation and Certification Office of TÜV Rheinland AG since 2019. She has worked with conformity assessment bodies in different positions since 2004. Before that, she served in different technical functions for environmental technology companies. From Brazil, regulator and main QI institution Inmetro, the Brazilian National Institute of Metrology, Quality and Technology. I would like to introduce Léa Contier. She heads the Division for Technical Barriers to Trade of the Office of International Affairs. Her responsibilities involve, among others, the National Inquiry Point for Technical Barriers to Trade, TBT, the subgroup number 3 on technical regulations and conformity assessment for Mercosur, and participation in the main TBT discussion forum. So right now, I will pass over to Pia to give her opening statements. Pia, please.
Well, thank you very much, Karina. You gave me some questions in regard to a statement to start this discussion. Well, in regard to the pandemic situation, so your question was focused on if this has an effect on supply chain. Yes, certainly it has an effect. In particular, there were some material issues not being, which had not been possible to go from one side of the globe to the other. But on the other side, we had an increase of specific products such as face masks. And in this issue, so for this point, it is of particular interest to have a very good quality infrastructure, so a functioning infrastructure. And so TÜV Rheinland as a conformity assessment body, notified body, inspection body, and with laboratories around the world are here included to provide specific services. In regard to quality infrastructure, we have already heard a lot of different things today. from other speakers how this work, in particular in Europe and in Germany. And insofar, it's quite interesting to know how it is also in other countries, such in Brazil or in India, and how we can contribute to this. So with our expertise, knowledge, so yeah, and being on site. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Pia. Léa?
Oh, hello, good morning to everyone. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be here. And on this issue, and for the perspective of both an inquiry point and also an institute which has a role in regulation, it's important to know that during 2020, more than 100 notifications related to COVID-19 were submitted by members of the WTO to the TBT agreement. And the notified measures broadly related to streamlining certification procedures, ensuring that medical goods were safe, and making food available by relaxing technical regulations. Now, and from now on, you know, how will be the impact of the use of IQ, as you asked, for global value chains, etc. And obviously the disruptions that are being felt in production led many companies to realize that they have to diversify their supply base, and also to probably in some cases reshore. And many countries might see this as an opportunity then to attract foreign investment in order that, well, they can produce these goods and components for larger companies. But they will have to look very carefully into providing adequate IQ services, which are very much necessary to assure product quality and safety. And we know that international trade depends on the confidence and the trust that those two attributes are met. And so traceability, comparability, reliability can only be provided by a robust quality infrastructure, which is linked to the international system. And so, and we all know that this is a coherent infrastructure, and the use of international accepted standards, and then the use of mutual recognition results not only in the decrease of conformity assessment costs, but also avoids litigation and consequently costs again, and not only costs but time. So I think these are my preliminary remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Léa. Please, Sonia.
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to people from all around the world. It's my honor and privilege to be part of this panel discussion today. And first of all, I would touch upon, of course, I think the previous speakers have also done that, how does quality infrastructure is supporting the international trade system. I think we all agree that, of course, the quality infrastructure is basically guaranteeing the quality of products and services. And as Léa said, and of course Pia also kind of confirmed when she was talking about conformity assessment, that it is important to enable access to the foreign markets with investment opportunities. And again, when I look at India, of course, access to foreign markets like India is QI becomes super important. And of course, assisting in product diversification, exploring further avenues in research and development, skilling and training, resource allocation, and most important, companies will be looking at ROI. Especially in the post-pandemic world, when, of course, the global supply chains have been challenged and trade has been questioned for its benefits against protectionism. I mean, you asked about how could quality infrastructure pillars could support the international trade system. And I really believe, and of course, everybody else also believes, that regulatory harmonization would actually definitely increase the efficiencies and definitely reduce the cost by avoiding any duplication of efforts. And given the extent of globalization and the globalized world we are living today, especially in manufacturing activities and research and development, it is absolutely no longer possible for individual, regional, national regulatory agencies to ensure the safety and security of their products and services in their respective nations. So I am a firm believer of regulatory harmonization, and this can only bring emerging markets, open markets, and cooperation between regions just better. So that's from my side in terms of opening remarks.
Thank you, Sonia. Following up to your opening remarks, then I would like to maybe ask Sonia, you are in constant dialogue with the German industry in Delhi. Which are the main technical barriers that are currently affecting trade between Germany and India from your perspective?
Okay, India is a very, very interesting but sometimes complex market, but I would say a market of opportunities as well. But we've also realized that over the last few months that there have been certain national specific marking and certifications which have actually created technical trade barriers. So we really have to look at some international framework models of cooperation as much as possible. Of course, we all have to bear in mind the each individual market sensitivities at while international harmonization as well. But these so-called regional specific national marking and certification did create trade barriers in the last few months. And also from the point of view of industry at large, many a times there is very less time which is given for compliance and conformity with practically not feasible, which are sometimes practically not feasible to comply with. And this basically pauses the business without enough notice. And if somehow the lead time is there, then probably even adhering to those national certifications probably could help. But the conformity assessment, approvals and acceptance by both sides in terms of both the regions, or let's say two cooperating markets or regions, have to be deliberated and openly discussed. So I think compliance, time, and of course the national specific marking and certifications and quality infrastructure regulations did create technical barriers, but I still see hope. I still see a lot of work being done, and I can only appreciate the cooperation between the Indo-German Chamber of Commerce and GQPI, where we've been working constantly in this regard to create ease of doing business for at least German businesses in India. So we've got about 1,800 German companies active in the Indian market, and of course, we are trying hard with all agencies, including GQPI, to work together in this direction to create a little bit more business conducive atmosphere.
Thank you, Sonia. I would then change my questions to Pia. You represent an international conformity assessment body that is present in several countries and deal with different QI demands. Where do you see the need of more international technical harmonization for cabs from the cabs perspective?
Well, I think it is very important to have, in particular, an exchange about the different quality infrastructures, so the regulatory systems. So if we have a look on this global quality infrastructure project, so managed by the Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs, I think it is a very good platform to have such an exchange. In particular, I think that we have common elements in regard to safety and quality of products, but perhaps the approach is different between one country to others, so between the regions. So Europe has one way, we learned a lot about this way, but other countries have other approaches. And what the first step, in my opinion, is that we need to learn how they are managing this. What is their principle? What they are focusing in regard to having conform products and to support their own manufacturers and their own industry. And also to have a specific quality standard which is recognized globally, so also in other countries. And we heard today already about the IIF, so the ILAC, so about different possibilities to have a kind of recognition. That is one so very important steps to go ahead, because this is a basis for conclusion of trade agreements. And but I think on the other hand, we need to know how to approach here. So we can contribute in regard to our experience, our expertise and knowledge, as we are already present in different regions and in a lot of countries. So therefore, we are not only partners and of the industry at site in these countries, but also for regulators to participate in different discussions and an exchange and to find how to align things. Nevertheless, we need to know that countries have their own system and we need to respect these systems. That is, in my opinion, one of the first steps to go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Pia. I'm sure then I'll head back to Léa, who is here in Brazil. I'm sure she will agree with that as a from the perspective of regulator, accreditation body, and WTO focal point, Léa. You have a broad view of the QI effects on trade. What do you think are the main benefits from international harmonization of QI requirements in this environment?
Well, we've been listening to this, I think, throughout these 2 mornings, mornings for us in the seminar. And obviously, the main benefits come from the use of international standards and international recognized conformity assessment bodies. Since, as I said before, they decrease the burden on manufacturers, not only by avoiding multiple tests to meet different requirements, different standards, and duplicate tests because tests are not accepted in the countries, so in different countries. So you have test in your country and then test again in the other country. And that, the having a coherent and recognized international QI infrastructure not only decrease costs, but also time needed to demonstrate conformity assessment. And we know time is money as well. But I think that the statement of, or the dream of one standard, one test accepted everywhere is not yet common practice in many countries. And especially when one refers to certification of regulated products. It's easy when it's when you talk about self-declaration, manufacturer's declaration. But when you come to third-party conformity assessment, it's really hard to get the acceptance, not of the testing results, but the conformity assessment results. And we should not forget also that voluntary sustainability standards now have increasingly come into play, and consequently, an international coherent IQ is also very important. So the QI, the QI is the basis for everything, for facilitating the exchange of information, the recognition, and fortunately in Brazil we have very much of that in place, because we take part in all the major mutual recognition agreements that are available, the ILAC, the IAF, the BIBM, some from OECD as well. And I think these are the benefits. Now, should I go on to the challenges as well?
Go ahead.
Yes, well, thinking as an inquiry point to the TBT agreement, one challenge is learning of new regulations that are not notified to the WTO, but that are put in place by different countries. This is a challenge because it demands resources to monitor regulation activity, and so transparency is very important. And if it's not easily found, you really have to dedicate an awful lot of human resources and also financial resources to find out what's going on in the world, at least in the markets of interest. Another challenge is not only the difference of the regulatory approach, and that's a reality anyway, but it's also the difference in the maturity about regulation and the different degree of implementation of good regulatory practices. And these all have an effect, an impact on the quality infrastructure that is necessary. And when you look at different countries, you also see that's a difference in the degree of implementation national quality infrastructure. So together, the degree of maturity of the regulatory process and then the degree of implementation of the quality infrastructure, this is all interrelated and one has an impact on the other, And, but I think one of the challenges is that we have experienced that many problems arise not from the technical and performance requirements for products and services, but mainly from differences in conformity assessments procedures that are set in different markets. And then on the specific rules of not accepting each other's result. So all the same, I think that QI coherence, which has been put forward throughout this seminar, is of utmost importance. In the case of Inmetro, Inmetro has many roles as the National Institute of Metrology, as the Legal Metrology Regulation Authority, as Product Safety Regulation Authority, and the accreditation body, the National Accreditation Body, and also the National Inquiry Point for TBT, for the TBT agreement. So I think I would single out two big challenges. One is to maintain our participation in the several mutual recognition agreements. It demands human and financial resources and a high degree of coordination and organization. So providing traceability to the country and maintaining accreditation activities under peer review represented a strategic contribution to trade, both domestic and foreign, then to human, animal, and vegetable health, to safety and the protection of the environment, what we call the legitimate objectives quoted in the technical bars to trade agreement. And then I would add that that a particular challenge for the inquiry point is identifying all those Brazilian regulations that have to be notified to the TBT trade agreement. And I would finish by saying that we think that coherent and internationally inserted quality infrastructure is very, very important, not only to trade, but also to economic development, as we put it in the first, when we answer to the first round of questions. We should not forget that social technologies also have a demand on products and services, and these are becoming increasingly important. And they cannot go without quality infrastructure. Okay, I think that's what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Léa. I'll take a little bit of your comments, Léa, back and ask maybe Pia, considering what Léa has said about the maturity, different maturity levels of the QI systems in different countries and its implementations, and the differences in conformity assessment procedures. How do you think the international cooperation could support, maybe advance this agenda for harmonization in this all these challenges?
Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to give here some thoughts. Yes, it's true. As we heard already today and yesterday, we have different systems. So we learned a lot about the European system, which is differently built up compared to other countries. So just to mention standards. So in Europe, we have so it's very important for us too to have standards on a national, international level, and to use them, but in particular to fulfill the requirements of our legislation, which we have in Europe. So the application of standards are voluntary unless they are fixed or required to be mandatory by legislation. So this is already different in other countries. So there are countries where you have every specification or technical specification how to provide a specific solution. So this includes also the conformity assessment for products by a legislation, so by mandatory standards. And as soon as there are new products, then there are new mandatory standards created to be applied. So that's one very important difference we might have between some regulatory systems in comparison to the European one. Another one, which Léa already mentioned, is, and this is also very important, that we have a different manner to live and to translate and to apply, so in regard, for example, to quality conformity assessment requirements. And that is like it is worldwide. So we are all human beings being involved in the system. We do all around the world our best. And to have an exchange and to learn more how to adapt or how to develop something new, I think the main way, or a very important way to go forward, is an exchange. A continuous exchange. So you all know, and we have already addressed this also in different projects via the GPQI. So new topics such as cybersecurity, such as artificial intelligence, but also circular economy. And these are very important topics. We need to work together to learn how we are approaching this in different countries, what we are doing, so to learn from each other and to find a solution so we can go forward and facilitate trade on a global way.
Thank you, Pia. Now that we've heard some of the challenges from one side of the regulator and the CAPs, I would like to take back to Sonia and ask her, what do you think the particular benefits would arise for the industry moving forward in this? We've heard a little bit about this already, but in your opinion, what do you think would be the benefits?
I think the list of benefits is endless. I mean, we've again spoken about it during the day and during this panel as well. So especially when it comes to Indo-German perspective or the cooperation between India and Germany, I see India at a stage of basically evolvement of innovative technology, maturing businesses, adoption of best practices, and increased safety and use of products and services. So businesses will basically only mature and will only be interconnected more. And I heard words like respect, I heard words like transparency and a constant dialogue. And we've also realized that when it again comes to Indo-German perspective, that there have to be some mutual grounds of acceptance, which are very necessary for the business to thrive. And this will definitely reduce administrative burden, duplication of efforts, saving cost, and leading to better resource management. So, I mean, we are happy currently with the Indo-German trade, but we also see there's a huge untapped potential which can be only achieved by way of quality infrastructure, coherence, international harmonization, only in the end to impact positively the businesses, but also impact societies, impact consumers. And in the end, it's all about people. So whatever we are doing is also to impact the lives of people as well when it comes to secured and safe products and services. So I think we can just go on with the benefits. The only thing is that we have to find mutual, respected, transparent, constant dialogues leading to better business models and better beneficial impacts on the society.
Thank you, Sonia. I'm getting a few questions from the public already, and I would like to address one of them and maybe do a round of answers, but start with Sonia because it's directed. Well, one of the main, I'm going to adapt here, but one of the main barriers in Brazil that we see is harmonization in standards and voluntary standards, because they are sometimes adapted to specific national challenges. And I would like to ask you, in India, how do you see the involvement of the companies in the development of standards, and how important do you think how they are incorporated in the national your national environment and industrial environment?
Yeah, without dialogue with the industry, I think we won't be able to achieve what we want to achieve. So, industry is at the core of the process of developing these standards. And I would say what we've achieved with GQPI and the German Chamber of Commerce, we're in constant dialogue with our members. And they are basically also driving the process of this coherence of the Indo-German mutual, evolvement of these standards, which are sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, that of course sometimes these national specific marking and certifications could create some barriers, but again, constant dialogue with the policymakers, constant dialogue with the bureaus of the various standards, and of course a constant dialogue with the chambers and every stakeholder is a process which has to be followed. And I would say yes, we're doing it very regularly, and it is basically the industry which is driving us and helping us define. Of course, the government here is also respecting the feedback from the industry as well, because both policymakers, stakeholders have to work very closely with the industry, and of course, also work very closely with the society.
And then I would maybe take it back to Léa, because she's been very much involved in the TBT WTO discussions, and ask you, Léa, how do you think these voluntary certifications and standards are strongly considered barriers to trade. One of the questions says European markets themselves have a number of voluntary and private certifications in food sector, aerospace, and telecom. In automotive sectors, do these also count as barriers? What are the perspectives of the participants? So, Léa.
Voluntary standards, and they consider if you take the agreement into perspective, the TBT agreement, a barrier to trade can only originate in regulations, no? And but not from voluntary standards, because that's not asked for by the state. Only if a voluntary standard then is quoted in a regulation, then all becomes mandatory. And so, although the agreement has an annex which talks about good standardization practices, and the individual national bodies of standardization have signed that in from most member countries, you can only raise trade concerns when you are talking in the TBT committee, when you are talking about regulations. But you can argue that the regulations are not being, in many cases, based on international standards. But voluntary standards itself, they can be practical barriers. You know, you cannot then turn to the agreement to complain, but they are barriers in practice. And even the voluntary sustainability standards, which are much in use nowadays and are increasingly being adopted, of course, they are many times are barriers. And there also, again, as I said before, the QI is very important. So that's a new challenge, because although it's not the state, the government that's saying, oh, you should adopt this, you should adopt that, but it might be, as we all know, large supermarket chains that are demanding. And that's putting a mandatory private demand. You know, if you do not meet those requirements, you cannot sell to that particular buyer, you know. And so in practice, they are barriers to trade, but they are not being considered as yet under any WTO discussion. Obviously, there have been lots of talks, but that has not been institutionalized in the WTO and not in the TBT committee. So, but as I said, they much affect trade, and that's a problem. We, in Brazil, had, well, a study came to perhaps to a figure of about 40 to 50% of our agricultural exports are being affected by these voluntary sustainability standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Léa. And now I hear Pia is working on a proposal and recommendations for harmonized QI. So maybe after we've heard about the challenges and difficulties, maybe Pia, you could present us or talk a little bit about your proposal.
Thank you very much, Karina. Yes, so just to mention, I would like to react on what had been said by the other panelists. So in regard to recognition of tests, of certificates, and so on, I would like to mention again what we heard already today from the DAX representative, that there are already systems, organizations existent, which is IIF and ILAC. So the focus there is to have a recognition of tests. In addition, I would like to mention here the CB scheme, which is another one, which is a private system. So for the recognition of test results of electric and electronic components, and this is on a voluntary basis. So for private, organized, and also naturally based on mutual recognition by countries, but these are examples that we are already having such systems, so such situations. So in my opinion, what we should consider, what I wish, is to continue, as I mentioned already, to talk, to exchange on all these challenges we have, how we can manage in regard to standardization or legislation, to find a common way, to get similar management of these challenges in regard to, as I mentioned, to sustainability, which is certainly a topic as well as for circular economy around the world. It's not only in some countries, and so I would be happy to continue on this. So that would my statement or my recommendations, if you like. Thank you.
Thank you, Pia. Léa, one question that came in is that Inmetro has been moving largely towards a different model of regulation with broader and simpler regulation. How do you think this would impact Brazilian integration to international trade system?
Yes, we've been discussing improving our regulatory approach at Inmetro, and not only that discussing, but we prepared a set of guidelines that underwent public consultation. And these guidelines will now be published till the end of November, and they will cater for increased use of international standards, yes, and they also say that regulations should emphasize the use of minimal and essential requirements. So these two aspects will certainly increase trade. I think will increase Brazil's insertion in foreign trade. It's important to mention that after the guidelines were submitted to public consultations, many comments were received, and they've been analyzed, and they will be presented in the public hearing that will take place on the 27th of October, next Wednesday. And this public hearing, as it is open to everybody to participate, it will be in Portuguese. And after the publication, which, as I said, we hope it will happen until the end of November, it's expected that the pilot implementation of the guidelines will start at the beginning of the next year. And this implementation will start, say, by product family or sector, you know. So, and we decided to go slowly on the implementation because we have to learn with the implementation, then improve it until we don't know how many years it will take to have a very mature framework in place. But I think it's important to say that it's not only Inmetro is improving its regulatory framework, but also the whole country. Over the past 2 years, we've had tremendous advances on the regulatory policy reform. And for instance now, regulatory impact analysis is mandatory for all regulators, for the independent federal agencies, but also to ministries which produce regulations in any field. So there's been a tremendous advance, and there are provisions for the use of international standards, and the framework is set by what we call the economic freedom law.
Thank you, Léa. And I'm sure GPQI will be there to support Inmetro as much as we can and you need. Taking back to Sonia then. Sonia, where do you think the international cooperation on QI topics could enhance or potentialize the development for the industry in India?
First of all, I mean, the government here has also announced a lot of PLIs recently, the production-linked incentives. And for companies and businesses to actually benefit from these PLIs, I think the first step is the coherence of the QI, the standards, the certifications. So I would say a long-term regulatory roadmap is also something which is very important between two cooperating markets as well. And this would only help the international business. So I would say QI projects, and of course all the cooperation which we've been doing in the last few years basically is only going to benefit the ROI when we have a long-term regulatory roadmap defined by mutual acceptance and finding a common ground and even sometimes a level playing field, so to say.
Thank you, Sonia. Now, maybe Pia, on regards to the future, where do you think we can take this, and how the cooperation?
Well, as I already mentioned, I think a first step is to meet or to continue to meet what we do already, to learn where is to make things better, what kind of requirements has each side, and what can be done, what can be realized. So what kind of quality infrastructure or regulatory system we have, and what is necessary to approach. So to talk clearly on that, yes, certainly it is important, but I think that we are already on the way here. So we are already doing a lot of these, let me say, conformity assessment activities, services in different countries. So we can contribute with our expertise, with our knowledge. We should continue this exchange to know more what kind of specific standardization is necessary, how we can do so. But at the same time, I think it's quite important to understand what kind of concepts we have behind our systems. What are the ideas behind? So, as I mentioned already, a common element what we have around the world is that we would like to do the best in regard to quality and safety to protect not only the environment, but workers during operation of machinery. So consumers, when they use and buy, so buy and use products, and so further users, so industry, and so professional users. And therefore, I think changing the role, for example, to be on another side could help a lot here, to bring things forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And Now moving a little bit on a more global view of the QI, I would like to ask Sonia on from the perspective of the private sector, how do you think that QI can foster innovation and economic development?
I think QI only paves the way for further innovation and further research and mutual topics of, again, research and development. So QI is basically also somehow presenting an ease of doing business platform. So I can only say QI, I think we've heard about it. It is only going to reduce, not I would say technical barriers, but at least comfort the willingness of the companies to invest more in the topics of research and development, which are joint topics of research and development to definitely benefit both the cooperating markets.
Thank you, Sonia. Maybe on the same topic, I'll do the final round for each participant to give her opinion, and then we will close. So, Pia, what do you think? How do you think QI can foster economic development?
Well, QI, as we already said, is necessary. We need it. We should continue in this, and again, we should follow a way which serves to improve the current systems we have. And because we all are not only interested to contribute with our regulatory work, but we need to remember that we are at the same time consumers and users of products. And I think what is very important is that we would have confidence in products, that we would have safe and quality products. And I think that is a very important thing we need to state every way. And for this purpose, I think it is very important also to have, in particular for products with high risk, independent conformity assessment bodies included. It is necessary to remember at this stage too that there are a lot of manufacturers around the world which are coming to us and asking us how can we move forward in regard to make quality or safety of our products better, and to state it by a specific declaration, and to give us a confidence to consumers and users, as I already mentioned, to those using these products. Thank you.
Thank you, Pia. Léa,
I agree with
opinion? Go ahead.
I understand you want me to make consideration of the same, yes?
Yes.
Yes, I agree totally with Pia and Sonia when they talk about the importance of workers, consumers, citizens, etc. So I think I would address another issue, which is understanding QI as extremely important as a sound basis for scientific and technological advances. Science and technology rely on measurements, and these measurements have to be traceable and reliable, comparable, etc. And many times we tend to forget that this quality infrastructure serves also the initial steps, of any advances that will result in a product. So I think that's also important. And I think what it's being said about understanding each other's quality infrastructure and also the regulatory framework is extremely important. But I think one way of advancing is also using the increased interest in trade agreements. And Brazil is involved with Mercosur in negotiating many agreements, and it's finished one with EFTA and another with the European Union. It's very important that we go a step forward in something which is not easy to do, but I think it will make an advance towards a harmonized understanding, which is regulatory cooperation. And that's not cooperation to, have exactly the same regulation, but at least, to help each other, not only with understanding, but filling in the gaps of capacity building and even sometimes physical infrastructure. So that's all very important. And when you have all these things in place, obviously you have economic development.
Thank you. Thank you, Léa. Now I would invite you to make your final statements if you still would like to say anything to close this discussion, and then we'll hand back to Vera. But Sonia.
My final statement is we cannot reverse globalization. We cannot reverse this interconnected world today, how much we might wish to in regional markets or perspectives from different nations. But the fact remains that we're today living in a very close-knit, interconnected world. And QI and harmonization of standards of QI infrastructure is pertinent. There is no choice. So to be able to move forward, we have to work together. And that is why international harmonization is super pertinent, I would say, to even survival. So that would be my statement.
Thank you, Sonia. Pia?
Well, I have not so much to add. So I think that the ladies already said the most important things here. So the only thing I would like to emphasize that we are willing and we are here to continue our contribution from side of TÜV Rheinland in these discussions. And this development, so further development of standards and legislation, and to be or to participate in discussions in regard to new technical challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Pia. Léa?
Being the last is a hard job because everybody has said what you wanted to say. But anyway, I'll pick on a few words. I think transparency is something that I like to insist on. That's very important. But I think stakeholder engagement is extremely important, not only for regulation, but for also developing products. And I was watching a seminar the other day when they said that is very interesting because you never imagine how consumers will use products. They might use products for something that product was never intended for, and they discover a new way of doing it. So, and when you start talking even more to children, to teenagers, to older people, etc., and you pick up their needs or their ideas and all that, then a whole world opens of demands for the quality infrastructure as well. So I think we are not only interconnected worldwide, globally, but we have to be connected with all, this creativity which is going on, especially with the youngsters. And because from these thoughts, are arising the new demands for quality infrastructure. So I think it's a tough job, to monitor what is going on in the world and also prospecting ahead so that you can be prepared when the need actually arises and comes. I think, well, that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Léa. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Pia. I said we had here today 3 powerhouses, so I have very little to add to what you said, but it's pretty clear to us that we have a QI to support the development and the advancement of trade. I think it's something that we can't go back on, and that will base our advancements in technology, innovation, and in knowledge. And with that, I hand it back to Vera to move on with our closing ceremony.